We are now official. Welcome everybody to Museum Club today. It's nice to have you all here. Really pleased at having another quality session today. So just by way of our usual housekeeping, we're going to have everybody muted at first. We're going to go ahead and proceed with our presentation, but as soon as Dr. Prinzing is done with his presentation, we will allow people to unmute, to ask questions, etc. If you have comments or questions during the course of the presentation and you don't want to forget them, you're more than welcome to enter them into the chat as well, and we can try to address them when we can. But it's good to have everybody here. Like I said, the Museum of Idaho is doing well. I just showed off a gorgeous, well, not a new artifact we have, actually a very old artifact that we have that we've just been restoring, this fantastic flag of ours that predates the War of 1812. And it's just part of the new Way Out West exhibit that is making wonderful progress right now. And we're still shooting to open in December. But as with everything right now, there's a lot of uncertainty and we'll see what happens. But that's the goal. And so we're excited to welcome everybody back into the museum right away to see Darwin and Dinosaurs, if you haven't seen it yet, and then to come see what's coming up in the coming months as well. I will mention real quickly also for you museum members who may or may not have seen it so far, we are introducing a new initiative within our Haunted History Tour program this year. It's our most popular education program of the year, runs throughout the last couple weeks of October. And it's always been difficult getting tickets in the past. All 400 tickets go within hours and they crash our website and people are upset because they don't get tickets. And so we're working on some fun new stuff this year, including a member ticket lottery. So all of you museum members, if you are interested in entering the lottery, you can go ahead and do that on our website. It's free to enter with your membership, and then you will be entered into a lottery to win priority registration or even potentially free tickets to Haunted History. And so that's just one. We're trying to do more and more to spread the value and to spread good things to our dedicated members who have been with us for so long. And so that's just one way we're going to try to make that ticket purchasing process a little bit easier for you. So I think that's about all I have to say housekeeping wise. Again, if we're all muted for now, but at the end, when we get to the Q&A session, there is a mute and unmute button, usually at the bottom left hand part of your screen. And we would invite you to pose your questions at that time and enter the discussion, and we're glad to have you here. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the time, or I'm going to introduce rather Dr. Dan Prinzing, who we're delighted to have with us today. Dan has been the executive director of the Boise-based Wazmus Center for Human Rights since 2007. The mission of the Wazmus Center is to promote respect for human dignity and diversity through education, and to foster individual responsibility to work for justice and peace. So no small potatoes there. The center provides educational programs for teachers and students, advocates for human rights, and partners with other community and business leaders on a range of initiatives both here in Idaho and nationwide and abroad. And Dr. Prinzing has 3 degrees in education and another in history and government. He is well qualified on these subjects, and so we're happy to have him here to talk about what it is that our civic responsibility is all about. And without further ado, we'll turn the time over to Dr. Prinzing.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm delighted to be with all of you this afternoon. To give you a little context, I thought I would start with just a piece of our history in setting the stage for where we are today. So in 1995, there was an exhibit traveling the United States called Anne Frank and the World. The then director of the state's Human Rights Commission, Marilyn Schuler, was approached about bringing the exhibit to the state of Idaho. Pricey, she reached out to a number of businesses and individuals. Ultimately, that exhibit came and it was placed in the State Historical Museum, and in 1 month's time, over 45,000 visitors that traveled from throughout the state to come to the exhibit. That exhibit planted the seeds to build a monument to human rights in the capital city. So we as an organization were founded in 1996 for the purpose of constructing a memorial. That memorial was unveiled to the public in 2002, and that is when we gifted the Idaho Anne Frank Human Rights Memorial, not only to the city, but to the country at large. The memorial exists as the only Anne Frank memorial in the United States. It is one of the few places in the world where you would find the entire text of the Universal Declaration for Human Rights on public display, and it is now recognized as an international site of conscience. So collectively, we all know it comes out of our history, comes out of our states, in making a broad statement of this is who we are. These are the values that we share. It was not the reputation that had been garnered by a small band in northern Idaho, that Aryan compound that had branded us more as a haven for hate at a time when we were being known more for that than even our famous potatoes. Yet, we had a populace that insisted, that is not us. That is not who we are. That is not Idaho. And so the presence of the memorial continues to shape and redefine who we say that the state of Idaho is today. Once the memorial was unveiled to the public, then our work began taking its mission into classrooms and communities throughout the state. So as Jeff introduced, I'm the executive director of the Wazmus Center for Human Rights. We're the builder and the home of the memorial, but we operate also as an independent comprehensive education center. But our work is grounded in the messaging that comes directly from the memorial. It is our charge. I like to believe it is the physical embodiment of everything we stand for. So I thought to start us off, I'd like to give you a short tour of both the memorial, but also hint at the messaging that we're going to talk about more. So I'm going to go to a shared screen.
He who passively accepts evil is as much involved in it as he who helps perpetrate it. He who accepts evil without protesting against it is really cooperating with it. Martin Luther King, Jr. May the Idaho Anne Frank Human Rights Memorial stand as a tribute to Anne Frank's memory, as a warning to any who would dare trespass upon the freedoms of others, and as an inspiration to all whose lives are devoted to love, respect, understanding, peace, and goodwill among the totality and diversity of the human family. May this memorial inspire each of us to contemplate the moral implications of our civic responsibilities. Reverend Dr. Nancy S. Taylor. What is my civic responsibility? All that is necessary for the triumph of evil is that good men do nothing. Edmund Burke. We simply must work unitedly to remove from our hearts and to drive from our society all elements of hatred, bigotry, racism, and other divisive actions and words that limit a person's ability to progress, learn, and be fully accepted. Gordon B. Hinckley. Is it our civic responsibility to be the change you want to see in the world? Gandhi. The memorial actively engages us to think and to talk with one another. But Eleanor Roosevelt said, it isn't enough to talk about peace. One must believe in it. And it isn't enough to believe in it. One must work at it. This memorial is also a call to take action. Our dreams of equality and respect will never come true if we permit the seeds of division to be sown. Let us always reject the forces of hatred and bigotry. Cecil D. Andrews. Are we able to recognize the subtle signs of hate? In Germany, they came first for the communists, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a communist. Then they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a Jew. Then they came for the Catholics, and I didn't speak up because I was a Protestant. And then they came for me, and by that time, there was no one left to speak up. Martin Niemöller. Are we bystanders or upstanders when we hear or witness injustice? I swore never to be silent whenever and wherever human beings endure suffering and humiliation. Elie Wiesel. Are we willing to interrupt the spiral of injustice? Jimmy Carter once said, a beautiful mosaic, different people, different beliefs, different yearnings, different hopes, different dreams. Do we see ourselves living in a world in which the rich mosaic of life is honored and celebrated? What does that look like? Kind words can be short and easy to speak, but their echoes are truly endless. Mother Teresa. What you do not want done to yourself, do not do to others. Confucius. Each time a person stands up for an ideal or acts to improve the lot of others, they send forth a tiny ripple of hope. Robert F. Kennedy. When the whole world is silent, even one voice becomes powerful. Malala Yousafzai.
If God lets me live, I shall not remain insignificant. I shall work in the world for mankind. Anne Frank.
What is your civic responsibility?
Well, as the video has highlighted, that sets our topic for today. In asking the question, what is my civic responsibility? In doing so, I would like to take us into some of the work of the center as we really develop the concept. So I'm going to go into another screen share. And from this, we can begin our discussion. Within the video, you saw the actor standing before this statue that you now see on the screen. The statue is called The Other. Symbolically, it represents how injustice devolves in a community. Notice from the picture the stages of injustice: language, avoidance, discrimination, violence, and elimination. If you were actually standing in front of the statue, you would see that the stages are written not only in English, they're in Spanish, Hebrew, Chinese, Arabic, and in Braille. It's actually a piece in the memorial in which we invite visitors to come, touch, interact, as they begin to really think and talk about how does injustice manifest? How does it appear? Well, as we address the question, what is my civic responsibility? The word civic comes from the Latin word civis, which was the word for a citizen of ancient Rome. It was also a root word for city. So civic can also be anything related to a city. The original use was in civic crown, translated as corona civica, denoting a garland of oak leaves and acorns given in ancient Rome to a person who saved a fellow citizen's life. It recognized an act of service. When I'm asked about the work of the Wazmus Center for Human Rights, I often reference that we give a face and a voice to the other faith, the other culture, the other ethnicity, the other race, the other sexual orientation, the other who also lives within the fabric of our community. The other is an individual who is perceived by the group as not belonging, as being different in some fundamental way. Any stranger becomes the other. The concept of the other began for us in some of our international work. I was working in the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, conducting a series of interviews with students to evaluate the impact of a program model we had piloted that school year. In several of the interviews, the students talked about identifying community issues or problems that were not necessarily a problem for themselves, but were in fact a problem for others in the community. As one young man told me, I am tackling this problem for them because right now they do not have a voice. One day I might need them to speak for me. He spoke eloquently and compassionately about his need to help the other. In the case he was referencing, they were talking about the traveler students. In Northern Ireland, in the Republic, traveler students are gypsies. They're migratory. At the young man's school, the administration allowed the traveler students to attend, but they were invited to come to campus 1/2 hour after the school day had begun. They were housed behind the main building, and they were released after the school, or 1/2 hour before the school day had ended for most students. What the school was doing was segregating the traveling students from the rest of the population. The young man we spoke to felt this was a violation. He said, they are a part of our community. They are us. So today I speak for them because one day I might need them to speak for me. For 3 years, I managed a project in the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. During those years, I traveled to Jordan 5 or 6 times a year. Each trip, one of the Jordanians who was working on the project would insist that I experience something, eat something, or see something that would help me to understand Arab culture, the Islamic faith, or Bedouin tradition. On one trip, my colleague took me to lunch to talk about the pillars of the Islamic faith. we talked about the concept of jihad. He insisted that the American media had distorted the true meaning of the word. For Muslims, a jihad is the personal struggle one has with his or her faith, that internal battle one has when wrestling with issues of faith and belief in a higher power. He asked if I had ever experienced jihad. The more we talked, we discovered the more we had in common. The Arab language has a word for community. It is shahama, and it translates as always ready to help people, neighbors, anybody in need, and always ready to be a fragile support for members of the community. I had a contract to conduct an evaluation study on civic education in Thailand. For 2 weeks, I was interviewing Thai government officials, teachers, students, NGO representatives, gathering data for the evaluation. In the course of the study, I also spent a number of days with Buddhist monks, linking Buddhist precepts to the knowledge, skills, and dispositions of civic learning. One night I was taken to the ambassador from Myanmar's residence so that I could meet his honored guest, the most revered monk in Thailand. He was 90 years old. As is the custom and show of respect, I shuffled into the room on my knees and sat cross-legged before the monk for 2 hours. Most of the time he slept, so I turned and joked with the young monk who accompanied him on his travels. When the old monk awoke, I received a blessing for what he called the important work that shapes students' lives, and I scooted back out of the room. On 2 other trips to Thailand, I was able to meet with that young monk. One day, as we wandered through the temple grounds, he turned to me, smiled, and said, "You know, we are very much alike." While we had discussed faith and his years of training, we found our greatest commonality. We laughed a lot. The Thai language has a word for community. It is namjai, which literally means water of the heart. When Thai people say that a person has namjai, it means that this person is happy to make sacrifices for friends and extend hospitality to others. The center conducted a leadership program for 18 school administrators from Bolivia, Ecuador, and Venezuela. For 3 weeks, we delivered a series of seminars, cultural experience, and school visits, all in Spanish. On Sundays, I took the entire delegation to the Spanish Mass at St. John's Cathedral in downtown Boise. Of the 18, only 1 spoke a little English. Now, the nature of a grant-funded program like this is that we're on 24/7 as the hosts, the ambassadors, and as the program specialists. What was significant in this experience is that I do not speak Spanish. But for 3 weeks, we did a lot of laughing and cheek kissing. And on our final night together, I toasted with "Un mundo con mi amigos," one world with my friends. And we cried. It was probably the most gut-wrenching experience I've ever had in a hotel lobby. One of the Spanish language words for community is convivencia, and it means how to live together peacefully, regardless of what differences we have. We can live together. For 2 years, we conducted a program for teachers and students in Bosnia and Herzegovina, Kosovo, and Serbia. In the course of the 2 years, I spent several weeks in and newly independent Kosovo. Each visit included time with a cadre of young teachers who were new to the field of civic and human rights education. The culminating project in the program was a human rights democracy camp in Macedonia, a neutral Balkan country, in which we gathered 120 high school students from Bosnia, Serbia, and Kosovo, as well as 90 accompanying teachers, program coordinators, and government officials. For 1 week, I taught in a classroom of 120 students. I taught in English, which was translated into Albanian, then again into Serbo-Croatian. So what you have to kind of imagine is you tell a joke and you wait for the laughter to ripple through the room in different waves as it's translated into the variety of languages. One of the camp assignments included the writing of a poem for social justice. One student from Bosnia wrote, "Love is all we need. And Serbs and Kosovars and Bosnians, we all want it. We want the world based on justice, courage, and love between women and men. We want the 1990s never to hurt us again. We want the world which is led by youth too. We want to teach you something new. We want the world where people travel 20 hours to be together. We already made that world here, and it'll last forever." When she had finished reading her poem aloud, the room erupted in applause. She had captured what they all felt. On the last night of the camp, we held a dance for all the participants. The students and the majority of the teachers were having a great time. But then I noticed those young teachers from Kosovo, mostly male, all Muslim, tapping their feet, but not dancing. Their faith would not allow them to dance with the female teachers. It was like a painful memory of chaperoning a junior high dance and watching the wallflowers aching to be in the action. So what do? I went to my Albanian brotherhood. I pulled them to the dance floor, and we danced. And we danced. And I slipped out, and they continued to dance. These were my friends. The Albanian language has a word for community, humanitar, devoted to the promotion of human welfare. A training with teachers from Malawi taught me their word for community, Ubuntu. It means when you are on your own, you are as good as an animal of the wild. When there are two of you, you form a community. On this journey, the other has a face. Be they Arab, Jordanian, and Muslim, his name is Allah, and hers is Mona, and they opened their homes and extended their hospitality in the full depth of Bedouin tradition. Thailand is a young Buddhist monk who at the age of 30, after 15 years of monk training, decided to disrobe. He was having a Buddhist jihad. Kosovo is a band of Albanian brotherhood, poor, struggling teachers in a war-torn country still marred in the memory of unspeakable incivility. But they want to dance. And the faces of South America I see standing before the priest at St. John's, waiting to be blessed before they flew home. For me, each country, each culture, faith, all of the others, they have a face. They also have a word for community that seems so much richer and so much deeper than my own. Theirs is not to live in a community, but to be a community. So, how can we create a community? First, we begin recognizing the richness of the diversity and with intentionality, foster inclusion of the other. What you see on the screen now is a program model that we developed. It appears as posters that are now hanging in classrooms and schools throughout the United States, we recognize the commonality of our humanity. We also have to recognize the devolution of the injustice that is targeted, demeaned, and or marginalized the other within the community. As you see on the screen, we present injustice in the form of a spiral. Spirals are fluid. You see the inside, you see the outside. There is motion. Injustice devolves. Some of the other existing models are the pyramid of hate or the ladder of injustice. They're static, they're incremental. They place genocide in the top as if you were aspiring to genocide. In our research, it didn't seem to fit. We do not aspire to genocide, we devolve. Something is wrong in the community. The model begins by recognizing the power of words, language. When we start hearing the conversations of us and them, when we start hearing words that are used to target, demean, or marginalize others, when words become a weapon. So a lot of our programming, we talk about why words matter, that the words we use and the words we choose have import. In the devolving stages, we recognize avoidance. When we go out of our way to avoid coming into contact or not portraying those we have viewed or targeted as the other. I use the example, what does a modern day park or bus bench look like? A modern day design, they have individual seat dividers. Usually in a large scale presentation when I'm talking, if I ask, why have we created the dividers in the bench? I'm going to get some, they'll tell me we love our personal space. But someone has had a lived experience where that bench needed to be a bed. As we change the design of the benches, we push our homeless community further out of an area. It's not a crime to be homeless, but we have ways that we can avoid coming into contact. For others, if they read a book, or if their teacher is sharing stories or pieces of literature, and students never see themselves in the stories, no one of their race, no one of their religion, that is avoidance, where we're only portraying one view, one person. We devolve to discrimination. Once we have so dehumanized, how quickly the devolution can go to violence. Rather than genocide, we talk about elimination. I can eliminate you without taking life. I can do it through policy. Genocide actually has three different forms: cultural, behavioral, or physical. We talk about the elimination of cultural identity when we recognized what happened to Native students on the reservations who were taken from their homes and placed in boarding schools. Stripped of their cultural identity, their hair was cut, forbidden to speak Native language, forbidden to practice Native traditions, forced to convert to Christianity. Cultural identity had been stripped away. The decades of that would impact tribes, as so much of their history had been lost. For us, when we look at and examine the spiral of injustice, we have to always remember we're talking about people. It's not just a concept or a theme. It is targeting the other, and the other has a face. Our civic responsibility is to interpret the spiral of injustice as upstanders who recognize a wrong and take action to make it right. When we released the spiral of injustice, we also paired it with our Upstander program. Ours has never been necessarily an anti-organization, so we never created an anti-bullying campaign. For those in education, we know that students bully for a variety of reasons, factors far removed from what they are experiencing in school. What is happening at home? What is happening in a broader community that they're just bringing with them as they lash out? So rather than concentrating on the actions of the bully, we concentrate on those who are standing around and saying and doing nothing and just watching the bully. This is when we crafted then an Upstander program. It too, born out of our work with a Holocaust survivor. She had been 11 when Hitler came to power. She had her mother, 2 brothers living in Frankfurt, Germany. Rose would talk about how those who had been her friends yesterday became her tormentors today. And nobody stepped up to protect her. Nobody was there to defend her. Where were the upstanders? An upstander, the opposite of being a bystander. So as we work with students in community groups, we talk about how do we interrupt the spiral of injustice. We can do so by being an upstander. As I'm apt to talk with students, it's much easier to interrupt the spiral at the language stage than it is at the elimination stage. So that's where we continue to reinforce why words matter and how do we respond when we hear. We define an upstander as someone who is a defender, an advocate, and a supporter of human rights and human dignity. As someone who acts when witnessing inequality, injustice, or oppression. As someone who recognizes the need for empathy, dignity, and compassion. And as someone who recognizes, engages, and empowers others to confront injustice. To be an upstander is a call to action. The image you now see on the screen is the poster we released this summer. Adding to our Upstander program, providing the tools to help encourage us all to be an upstander. We used the acronym ACT, the ACT. The A, ask. When you hear someone tell a joke that belittles others or use a word that is demeaning, ask, do you know what that word means? Did you intend to be hurtful? What we're trying to encourage is conversation rather than confrontation. Good questions spark good conversations. I come from a place where I believe oftentimes words are uttered or jokes are repeated in ignorance. But those who are sharing the words or telling the joke really don't know what they mean. Or if they do, they need to hear that we don't all agree. Because if I remain silent, I am complicit in agreement. So I ask, not to shame, but to teach. The C is choose, because just as being a bystander is a choice, being an upstander is also a choice. Doing or saying nothing in the face of injustice implies that you agree. What we have been working with this summer is that doing or saying nothing is not an option. But even the choice to become an upstander comes with choices. I published a piece in the Idaho Press earlier in the summer, and in that piece I outlined that at this moment, being an upstander comes with choices. We're seeing some choose to march in the streets. We're seeing others who choose to donate to the organizations that are doing the work. We see some who are educating themselves. Just look at the bestseller list to see what titles are being read. Some are having some difficult conversations at home. Each the action of an upstander. The Wazmus Center has a podcast. This season, we're focusing on the upstanders in the community, giving added definition, illustration to what it means to be an upstander. We were interviewing one woman who was bemoaning the fact. She said, I'm not out marching in the streets. She said, I've always taken it to the streets. Since I was a teenager, I have marched in the streets. But she said, I just turned 80 years old, and my kids and my grandkids, they want me to stay safe. We're having a pandemic, so they don't want me marching in the streets, and I feel so guilty. That had always been her act as an upstander. We're encouraging her to just share her voice now. Another gentleman was bemoaning to me. He said, I know I need to be doing more. And I stopped him and I said, you have 4 children at home. How are you raising them? I know for a fact the compassion and the generosity, the service that he, his family, that his kids provide. I said, you're educating the next generation. That's the act of an upstander. Being an upstander is a choice, but it comes with many choices. We illustrate the concept in the memorial. A couple of years ago, we expanded the memorial, adding a third in its size with the addition of the Marilyn Schuler Classroom for Human Rights. It gave us a shelter, permanent seating, and allowed us to bring in technology into the memorial. A gentleman from the East Coast was visiting Boise. He heard about the memorial, came to talk with me. It was right as we were releasing the plans for the construction of the classroom. And he said, I want to be a part of this. He said, I want to donate a tree and fund a marker to go with it. The marker is dedicated to a man who was an evangelical Christian in Poland who saved 700 Jews in his glass factory. The donor said, I want one word highlighted on the marker. He said, I want it noted that the man chose to save 700. He put himself at risk as well as the lives of his family, but he made a choice. And he said, that man's choice gave me life. I'm a descendant of one of the survivors, of one of those he saved. I'm here today because one man chose. The T is teach. Teach by example of how you live your life. We recognize that the word itself, upstander, is a verb as well as a noun. I cannot call myself an upstander if others do not witness me as such. In his sermon, The Drum Major Instinct, Martin Luther King Jr. had noted when he passed and someone was asked to give his eulogy, he said, do not allow them to say that I won the Nobel Peace Prize. Let them say that I loved and served humanity. That's how he wanted to be remembered. That was his legacy. So when we talk about the teach, by the example of how we live our lives, it is the legacy that we will leave behind. It's what others will see and remember. Being an upstander is a call to action. We translate this in another program. We had businesses in the valley come to me, and they said, Dan, we are committed as an organization to diversity and inclusion. We believe in it. It's who we are as a company. We have programs in diversity and inclusion. But how do we know that our workforce agrees? How do we know if our workforce is committed? Our response was to create a human rights certification program. It's a 6-hour certification program, all online, that focuses on 6 key human rights principles: diversity, inclusion, ethics, civility, respect, and once again, being an upstander in the workplace. Developing components of knowledge, reflection, and action, the program is designed for the individual. In other words, the program is not about coming in and saying, well, my company needs to do X, Y, and Z. It is a program to reinforce that I, as the individual, need to do X, Y, and Z. We did a year of field research focus groups as we were designing the program before we even took it into pilot. I was working with a number of focus groups, and I asked one, I said, why do you get certified in something? Why do you pick up a certificate? They shared, well, you add a certificate to your resume because you want to highlight added knowledge or skills that make you more marketable in the workplace. Okay, I said, but why would you want to be human rights certified? And they said, because this one is a certificate of my values. I have my knowledge, I have my skills, but these are the values that I bring to the workplace. After an extensive pilot, we went public with the program last January 20th, 2020, Idaho Human Rights Day, Martin Luther King Jr. birthday. Since we unveiled publicly, we've had over 400 completers, individuals, company by company, nonprofit by nonprofit, becoming certified in their values, making their statement, this is who I am, this is what I believe in, and this is what I will bring to the workforce. We know that the concepts are not just applied in our broader community. They're applied in our workforce, they're applied in our schools, they're applied in our homes. Etched into the stone of the memorial, Albert Einstein reminds us, the world is a dangerous place to live in. Not because of the people who are evil, but because of the people who don't do anything about it. Civica, Corona Civica, whose life will you save? These are the concepts that guide and develop our mission in the community. As we develop programming, whether we're talking a human rights for young listeners program we do with children ages 4 to 8, whether we talk about our human rights leadership program for students in the middle school, whether we talk about our programming in the high school or that we do on the college campuses or in the workplace, we continue to reinforce the message that when I hear or witness injustice, I have to make a choice. I have to do something. Within the next 2 weeks, as was highlighted on one of the slides, we are unveiling our Upstander toolkit. It's a toolkit that we'll be sending into every school in the state of Idaho with the Be an Upstander Act poster, a student brochure that reinforces the concepts, a video that we've just produced that actually showcases 2 scenarios that we filmed in schools of when you hear injustice or when you witness it, how will you react? And a lesson plan to help teachers that how can we foster a generation of upstanders, those who will be willing to speak out or step in whatever way. And as I said before, it's not that we all do the same thing, it's just that we each do something. And so as we've been working with audiences all summer, it's helping each of us to identify, well, what's my thing? What will I do? It goes back to that focus has been highlighted so much in these last months that in our isolation, the focus is on the I. That in this isolation, as I discover, who am I? What am I? What will I do? And what are my civic responsibilities? Well, I see we have a few minutes left. Let's open up for question or comment.
First of all, I just wanted to say thank you, Dan, for that presentation. Thank you for all of the wonderful work that you're doing in the community and more broadly. And I think we can all agree that the Upstander ideal is a wonderfully simple thing to start with. So
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, let's go ahead. And so we have got 10 minutes or so, 10, 15 minutes, if we want to, if there are questions. I've always got a couple in my back pocket, but I'll let others go ahead and talk first if you'd like. Just remember to unmute yourselves.
So Dan, I'm Marianne Allison. It's nice to meet you.
Likewise.
So the people who are getting certified via companies, right? So is that company spot? How does that happen?
How does that happen? That's a good question, Marianne. Thank you. Because the program is geared for the individual, we have a number of individuals that registered themselves. It's just something they want to do. Now, we have also had a number of nonprofits and companies in the state that said, we will sponsor employees who want to become certified, because the company is seeing the value of it in fostering the conversation. I've been working with a number of nonprofits this summer where they're getting cadres going through the program. And after they've got a core cadre there, they say, can we now have a conversation? And so the power of Zoom and this digital media, we've been having a conversation. Okay, let's talk about the conversation, the concepts. What do these principles mean? How do these apply? Conversations that are rich, but what we're acknowledging is the certification program is not the end of the roadmap. It is the beginning. It is the piece that starts the conversation. Now, within the business, the nonprofit itself, determining what are our next steps. So some we're working with, they're finding they need better policy, that their values as a company don't match up with the policies that are in place. I'm always of the mind that our greatest asset in any organization, nonprofit, for-profit, any organization, our greatest asset is the workforce. It is the people. Then if we couple the people with effective policy, we are enhancing the outcomes. Now for us, we're a service organization. We work with people. It is enhancing our ability to serve the public that we serve. And so let me give you another example with this, Marianne. So we had a large insurance company in the Valley. They called us in to hold a conversation, and this was pre-pandemic, so we could physically get together. They closed up shop for 3 hours, brought every employee, a large organization. They wanted a conversation on language. They were hearing too much us and them talk. And the owner of the company was getting a little disturbed. He said, nothing to the point of harassment or litigation, but he said, I just don't like what I'm hearing. So we did a 3-hour conversation on why words matter. Well, at the end of it, what we had discovered is the company had a mechanism for hiring or recruiting according to skills, but not according to values. Nowhere did they have a policy statement that said, this is who we are as a company and what we believe in. That in itself may have been a gatekeeper that may have stopped some people from applying. But instead, with no statement, they were attracting those that had the skill to do the job, but not necessarily the disposition to play well with others. And so when we left after our session, where our work ended with the company, they were now bringing in, they had to create policy to align the values that they hold. There is a wonderful quote that I use often from Fred Rogers, certainly one of the icons in the US, but he talked about that what we do is not more important than who we are. That in fact, the who we are is in fact what we do. That the two should be wedded there together. And so that's where we've been working with a lot of companies. They said, take the focus off of the what you do and let's start with the who are you, and let's make that a clear statement first, then focus on the skills to do the job.
Thank you. So one follow-up question. It sounds like you've had at least one for-profit company, and I would guess a fair number of nonprofits. Do you get more acceptance with other for-profit companies?
We do actually. I would invite you, if you got into our website, we actually keep a listing when a large cadre have completed in a given company, then we'll post them up on the website, because companies are also wanting that recognition that they have a core of workers that are certified that are committed to these values. And you would actually see on the list a lot of for-profit companies, all sizes. It's a program that it could be a company of 2 employees, it could be a company of 2,000 employees. We've got representation from HP, we've got representation from the Boise Bicycle Project. You know, it's just, it's the fit, because it's about the individual.
Thank you.
Dan?
Yes, sir.
How much success are you getting this into the educational system? Because I remember a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away that I had civics training when I was in elementary and junior high school, and we don't seem to do that anymore. So I think so many people are left without understanding their role in the United States and the government controls us. So
you have identified a real deficit, Ken. So what was not included in the bio introduction prior to coming to, so I've always been connected with the center before there was a center. I went back to that exhibit in '95 with it, but I was at that time a classroom teacher. I was a US history teacher and brought in on the first curriculum project for the center. From the classroom, I went to the Idaho State Department of Education, and I worked under Dr. Marilyn Howard's administration with it. And a lot of the work that the center is engaged in now began there. When Dr. Howard retired from public office, she came on the board of directors of the center, and that's when I came in initially as the education director. Now, to your point, Ken, what we recognized that there was going to be this void in education. There was a void in the standards. Now, when we were still at the department, we actually had a strong civic education standard. It ran through K through 12 social studies. We had a strong international education standard also in social studies, believing that students need to learn about the world. We don't live here in isolation. Idaho's economy is really needing that outward exposure. It's why we have trade partnerships around the globe, that we have to have that understanding of it. So that exists in the standards. We had a number of initiatives in civics, service, character, and international education that the moment Dr. Howard left office, the incoming superintendent eliminated. And now even those threads in the standards don't exist. So if the state was not going to do it, that's when Dr. Howard challenged me. Then she said, we have to do it even more. So back to your question, how effective are we? Fortunately, we work with educators in all 6 education districts or regions in the state. So we have our points of contact into schools, into districts throughout the state. So that though we're based in Boise, we're very much a statewide organization with our resources, with our training, our programs. As a nonprofit, we try to do as much and deliver as much as we can for free. It's a part of the service we provide. The posters that I showed, those that are in Boise or can stop in Boise and pick them up from our office, we give them out freely. The only charge we have is if I have to mail them. The certification program, $35 a user. In other words, we didn't want a concept that human rights only belong to those who can afford them, that the principles belong to all of us. And so our board is very much committed to, and it is that constant nonprofit fundraising, but to provide the services and the programming for free. And so at this point, we've been very fortunate with the linkage that we have throughout this. And I gotta tell you, there is wonderful pieces happening in schools throughout the state. And what we recognize that the power or the influence behind it, individual educators who are making sure it happens. What we're trying to help with is, can we institutionalize the programs? Because what happens when a good educator retires or moves on? Oftentimes we see the programs end. And so what we're helping districts with is say, let this become your focus. Let the district own this. So in fact, this fall as schools were coming back literally online, then we've been doing a number of school-wide presentations. So it's not just a topic for social studies or language arts. These are concepts that should permeate throughout all content areas. It is the core value or our commitment. And to your point, it is civic education. It is, how am I going to be a better citizen in my school, in my community, in my state, in my nation, and in the world.
Sorry, just to follow up in your presentation, I was taken by all the quotes that were on the wall there, and I wish everybody in the country could wake up and have to take 5 minutes a day just to listen to that small segment of your presentation, just to read those quotes. But I can remember when I was young, and Martin, and I'm not going to pronounce the last name correctly, but Niemöller,
Yes,
is, you know, that just reading that really affected me a lot, because you can't just hate. You know, I've been a member of both parties, and I know my civics taught me that yes, you can have totally different polarized views, but at the process of our country was to come together and somewhere in the middle.
yes.
And yeah, you can, you know, will be a total opposite. But that taught me that it's like, I wish everybody could, I wish maybe like you could get teachers, if nothing else, if they don't want to teach it so much, but to put those quotes on the walls of their classroom just so children can read them.
Yeah.
Maybe form the idea that just, I can't just arbitrarily hate someone because someone's put a label on them that they're Muslim,
Exactly.
that they're black, that they're Hispanic, and I'm supposed to hate them. When they start to realize, you know, when we get, if we, I'm going to get extreme here, but if we got rid of all the black people, we got rid of all the Hispanic people, then who are you going to do? And all we have was this homogenous little white nation.
Yeah.
Then who are you going to come after? Are you going to come after the Catholics, the LDS Church? Are you going to, you know, if I'm going to hate somebody because of the religion, the race? At some point, it's going to be a very boring world, and it's going to be a very shrunken population world, and you know, you're going to find some reason to hate somebody.
That's right.
Their hair is too long, their ears are too big, whatever excuse they can find. And I was thinking back to when I read that when I was a young child, and I wonder if just simply putting that on the wall in classrooms, that some kid might read that and go, you know, just like I did, I can't just arbitrarily hate somebody because someday they're going to come for me, and I need to start learning how to appreciate all the other wonderful people that are in this world. Anyhow, that's just my soapbox.
Thank you. You know, there are, and when I couple it, we have, the memorial is grounded in the quotes. We have over 80 quotes literally carved into the stone. It's why we added the classroom and brought in technology, because when you work in an environment where everything is literally carved in stone, it was hard to update and bring in new content. Technology allows us to do that. Two quotes that I do couple together, not only the Niemöller, because it really talks about any one of us can become the other. We can become the target. We have, not only is it featured on the Wazmus Center website as well as the Anne Frank website, in the classroom, we have a kiosk that highlights the history of human rights in Idaho, 1800 to 2018. This is our history. And it is done by time periods, but then it also breaks apart by group. So now I can look specifically, African Americans in Idaho, anything that happened with the African American community between 1800 and 2018. It's all grouped together then. LGBTQ, refugees, people with disabilities, Chinese, Japanese, Mormons, Jews, Native Americans, it's the broad list of all our community. It is the all of us. Well, within each of the group sections on the timeline, we also created a series of videos. We have 13 or 15 videos that we're highlighting. It's kind of the catalyst moment, the person, the event, the place, the legislation. What we wanted is, the memorial gets over 120,000 visitors a year. And so by placing them in these electric kiosks, we wanted visitors to get a sense of Idaho history. What we're also finding, a lot of folks living in Idaho need a sense of our own history. But for one of them, LDS in Idaho, the video highlights the Mormon test oath. Very few folks recognize that to be LDS in the Idaho Territory, as we were coming to say, no right to be on a jury, no right to vote, no right to participate in government. That language stayed in the Idaho Constitution until 1982. That's a piece of our history. Okay, so when does the them become an us? Okay, so we wanted to highlight, and these videos are each 2 to 3 minutes in length. African Americans in Idaho, really talking the chronicle of the story of Blacks within the state, oftentimes prohibited from participating, also subject to odd loitering laws or ways to target with it. But it also showcased in the video Senator Cherie Buckner Webb, Idaho's first African American legislator, and that when she was a child living in the north end of Boise, to look out the window and see a cross burning on her yard. So what we've tried to do in the videos is highlight not only the tragedy in our human rights story, but also the triumphs in our human rights story. Idaho, the first practicing Jewish governor in the United States, Moses Alexander. Our synagogue, the oldest, still in continuous use west of the Mississippi. These are milestones in our history. These are the pieces we need to celebrate as a community. So back to your question and your comment, the other quote I always mark out for students is, we have a quote on the wall by Billie Jean King. And she said, let's celebrate the differences. Sure, there are differences. We see them. We're not colorblind. We're not devoid of our senses. See them, recognize, and celebrate them. So our programming that we're working on this year, and it's going to be a major initiative for us, is conversation, not confrontation. Because to your point, we have become so polarized. Go back to civics. How does good legislation get formed? It's formed out of compromise. I'm not an advocate of a one-party state, whatever the party.